Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me. I'm Logan Arliss here at Illinois Aviation Academy for another Webinar Wednesday event. And man, what a beautiful Wednesday it was today for flying. Had a lot of progress, a lot of students passed check rides today. So that's something to be proud of. One announcement before we jump into our content for tonight. We have our CFI Academy starting February 22nd. So if you're looking to earn your CFI, start making some pay flying, make sure you give us a call. Still have some seats to be filled. Tonight's guest is going to be our expert for the night is Chris Fostiak. We're going to be talking about aircraft insurance, both for renters and owners, and most importantly, ways that you can lower your premium when purchasing aircraft insurance. So let's go ahead and get Chris onto the call. As always, if you guys have any questions that we don't address in the webinar, make sure you comment. We're watching both the Facebook and YouTube channel. So post your comments. We'll get to everyone's questions by the end of the show. Wait for his audio here. Hey, Chris.
Logan, how are you?
Hey, welcome to Virtual IAA. How are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hey, before we dive into everything, I just want to say thanks for coming on and thanks for joining us for the webinar. And we surely appreciate your expertise on the subject.
Hey, thank you so much. And thanks for the compliment of my expertise. I'll try and do the best I can to make up as much as possible.
Hey, that's all we're looking for. So before we jump into all the subject matter, could you just give us a little background on your position with Hayes Companies? What is it that you do? And you're also a pilot. So can you give us your backstory on how you got into aviation and what that looks like today for you?
Yes, sir. Well, I'll get started from the beginning here. How I got into I lost a bet, and here I am on the insurance side of things. No, all kidding aside, I've been flying airplanes for over 25 years. I started my my aviation career, you can say, at Illinois Aviation Academy as the #1 student of Mr. Woodrick over there. So
Awesome.
I have not crashed any of his airplanes yet, so I'm still in good standing and friends with the man. Fast forward till today, I've been in the aviation insurance business for over 20 years in combined underwriting and broker roles. Underwriting means I worked for the insurance company, and I worked across the country actually in different areas of risk, all from corporate aircraft, flight departments, helicopter operations, fixed base operators, flight schools, and everything else in between, to fixed wing and helo single engine aircraft as well. So I like to say I've got a kind of an all-encompassing experience across many levels, which kind of give me a unique ability. Nowadays, I'm a broker, which means I work for the client. The client hires me to be their insurance broker, their advisor, their risk manager, and their advocate when dealing with the insurance companies and providing a best resource for them for placing their aircraft insurance, identifying, analyzing the risks of loss, and where we can find the best partnerships together with insurers.
Awesome.
Last thing, I've been with Hayes Companies for about 14 years. I'm their vice president of aviation, and I serve as a national practice lead across the country, serving clients such as Harley Davidson, Kohler Company, worked on some country airlines as well. Mayo Clinic is also of clients, and we're fortunate to be working with them.
Awesome. Thank you for that backstory. So we'll dive into some of the technical stuff here. First question I have for you, does an aircraft with a good safety record mean lower rates for aircraft insurance?
Generally speaking, yes. And you can kind of break this question down into two parts. I would say the aircraft and the pilot. Because as we all know, an aircraft or any piece of machinery is inherently harmless until you put someone behind it. So what we really look at is how well the pilot interfaces with the aircraft. How stable is it? How well supported is the aircraft? And how well maintained is the aircraft overall? There's certain things that just aren't as popular as others out there that insurance companies haven't had the greatest experience with. That could be anything from the Aero Commander 690 to the MU2, the Beech Duke, the V-tail Bonanza back in the day before its tail section was fixed up, and the SR-22 actually, back almost 20 years ago when it was making its way on the scene. It was a technically advanced aircraft, and pilots transitioning from Cessna 172s, for example, weren't up to speed on the technical capabilities of the plane and found themselves falling behind the power curve. It wasn't a bad airplane at all. It's a great airplane. But what we see is that kind of dichotomy between the aircraft itself and the pilot, and those two combinations have to go hand in hand in order for the aircraft to generate a very favorable safety record with insurance companies. That this question here we can relate to question 8, which certainly we'll get to here a little bit down the road.
Great. Yeah, we'll look forward to tying these two together. So my next question, what is a breach of warranty in aircraft insurance?
So if there's anybody out there in the audience that is in the banking industry, you'll know what breach of warranty is. Basically, when you take out a loan on a car, a house, an airplane, etc., with the bank has interest in that asset, and they want to protect that interest as much as possible. So when you go ahead and activate insurance coverage on that piece of property the bank has a loan on, they're going to want to protect it. And the breach invalidate your insurance policy. Let's say you fly the airplane without a current and valid medical, or the airplane falls out of airworthiness certification, and you have a claim. Let's say you totaled the airplane. Your insurance company may deny that claim. So what happens is you may not see $1 because the claim is denied. However, the bank will be protected and they'll be paid off by the insurance company for whatever amount that is outstanding on the loan.
Good stuff. Now, we had a new medical standard come out, which is called Basic Med. It's been out for a little bit of time now. Will insurance policies cover pilots that are flying under Basic Med?
So the answer is yes. I preface it by saying most insurance policies will cover Basic Med, and the standard caveat to coverage is the pilot must have a valid medical certificate. And if they don't, obviously we can get into a claims denial situation. Now, Basic Med came out about 4 years ago now, and only the FAA would impose a 666 rule onto pilots under Basic Med, which means the aircraft has to be certificated to carry 6 passengers. You can't have more than 6 passengers on the aircraft, and the aircraft can't have a maximum gross takeoff weight more than 6,000 pounds. There's some other caveats to Basic Med, such as you can't fly above 250 or above 18,000 feet in the PCA, or leave the United States except for the Bahamas. So given all of that criteria under Basic Med, and if you don't break the rules under Basic Med, insurance companies will not have an issue covering you in those situations. Now, if you break the rules, the insurance company will follow the FAA. If the FAA thinks you broke the rules, insurance can deny the claim based upon their opinion. Good
news. So Basic Med is A-OK.
A-OK, and thanks to AOPA in third-class medical reform, really opened the doors to a lot of airmen out there to see their doctor every 4 years and not have to worry about, I guess you can say, more punitive action from your flight surgeon.
Absolutely. Do aircraft insurance policies include aviation premises coverage?
The answer is yes. It's a limited form of coverage that you can consider general liability insurance for how most people cover their properties and whatnot, like buildings, for example. Premises also extends to aircraft operations under an insurance policy. You can consider it like a shadow that follows you premises. And the caveat that insurance companies will use is, with the only within the direct operations of the insured, or only on behalf or in connection with the insured's aircraft operations will premises extend itself. So that means if somebody slips and falls around your aircraft, you had some hydraulic fluid spill out of the wheel wells, or you had oil spill out, or whatever, and someone falls or whatever, you have coverage for that.
Good to hear. Now, when talking in insurance, one common term is a deductible. Do most aviation insurance policies carry a deductible, and what affects how much that deductible is?
In many cases, you'll be surprised, but many aviation insurance policies do not carry a deductible. And that's generally driven through competitive reasons through the insurance companies. There used to be 20 years ago where you might find a $250 or $500 to $1,000 deductible on many light single engine or sometimes twin engine airplanes. Insurers have gotten away from that a little bit, unless you're getting into more of a unique situation. You have, let's say, a vintage aircraft, for example, that it's harder to find parts for, or, deductibles on that. For pilots transitioning, let's say owner pilots transitioning from like a Cessna 172 to a Mooney, and then a Mooney to a Beech Duke or something like that. They may put deductibles on those because it's considered an area of higher risk. For example, there's a client that I'm working with. It's an Aero Commander 690. It's a turbine Aero Commander 690 used for business, and the insurance company imposed a 5% deductible each and every loss on that, which translates to about $37,000 each loss. Whatever happens to that airplane, you have that deductible. And that's something newer that's coming out of the market right now, and I can talk about that a bit later. But we are starting to see on maybe aircraft that are beyond that 25-year mark, and aircraft that you don't see much of anymore, deductibles being imposed on them.
Very good. Now, what is an open pilot warranty, and who may use an aircraft and be covered by its insurance policy? For example, if I have an airplane, can I lend that plane to you, and can you operate my airplane and still be covered under my insurance policy?
Sure. So the open pilot warranty is very similar to what you consider an omnibus clause or permit policy, where you say, hey, Joe, Bob, Logan, here, take my car. As long as you're a licensed driver and you have my permission to drive my car, you're automatically covered by my insurance policy. It's the same concept in aviation, but it's taken one step further, where aviation insurance companies will post a requirement on that clause. For example, let's take a Cirrus SR-22. A popular open pilot warranty would be, you have to be a private pilot and must be instrument rated. You must have 500 hours total time, 250 hours in, let's say, complex aircraft, 50 hours in the make and model, and you must have been through a CSIP school or training or equivalent training in the last 12 months. So if you don't meet that open pilot warranty, you would have to be specifically named on the insurance policy and approved by the insurance company. So generally, insurance companies will approve up to 4 pilots, named pilots on the policy. Once it gets past 4, they start considering it a flying club. and then they'll start charging you additional premium because of a greater inherent risk for that many more people touching the airplane.
Very interesting. So we had actually a question came in on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
A little more specific here, so I'm going to read it off. So it's regarding a Bell 206 helicopter.
Okay.
So it's insured for $11K a year. Want to lease to 2 other pilots. That requires me to go to the commercial use at $40K. Would a non-equity flying club be more reasonable?
Aircraft dry leases pose, if this is a dry lease, it poses a little bit of a different animal, because insurance companies are starting to get away a little bit from that dry leasing scenario. So if you had 3 owners that had equity ownership in the helicopter, insurance companies would see that as kind of pleasure in business, Part 91 type operations, instead of leasing it out to these other individuals. So they may want to consider equity positions in that helicopter to avoid the commercial kind of 135-ish type of scenario that they're looking at.
Good advice. Now, in talking aircraft insurance, what does the term combined single limit of liability or smooth limit mean?
So a combined single limit means bodily injury and property damage coverage. So back in the day, those 2 coverages were split. You'd have one for bodily injury and another for property damage. But some light went off somewhere with some insurance genius, and they said, hey, why don't we just put these together? So that's what they did. And so what we have is that combined single limit, otherwise known as CSL, and smooth limit of liability. Those are 2 separate things, actually. So a smooth limit of liability means that you have, let's call it $1 million for your Mooney, for example, and that covers bodily injury, property damage to passengers, property, and persons. That's what that combined single limit does. Now, if you are what you call smooth limit, however, insurance companies will they like to impose a sublimit per passenger sublimit on policies. A popular one is $100,000 or maybe $250,000, which means it's broken up. Yeah, you have that combined single limit for third-party bodily injury and property damage, let's say for $1 million. But they'll say, you know what, we're going to put $100,000 per passenger sublimit on here, and we're going to make it worth your while and make the insurance cheaper for you. And we see a lot of that with a lot of single engine piston driven aircraft, that sublimit being driven. I always tell people, and this will get back to another question, but buy as much limit as you can afford. There is excess you can purchase out there. It might be 2 million, it might be 3 million excess of 1 if you can get the smooth limit. But look into it, because most insurance companies that are non-aviation, West Bend Mutual, whomever that may insure your auto or home, won't extend an umbrella over your airplane. So something to think about.
Absolutely. Now, what things are considered when an insurance company sets an insurance premium? So we kind of talked about the safety of the aircraft itself, the pilot. You got to think the operation. How do they come up with this insurance premium?
It's really a holistic type of analysis from the insurance underwriter. They look at everything surrounding the pilot, the aircraft, its environment. From the pilot's standpoint, most importantly, the pilot will look at their age, their experience, hours flown in that particular aircraft, training in that airplane as certainly qualifying factors from that standpoint. The aircraft, again, its age, what's its safety record like alongside the pilot. Is the airplane an AD hog? Does it have a history of of maintenance and there's problems from those standpoints. So the underwriters will look at that as well. Again, there's certain airplanes that just don't win popularity contests with insurance companies. That's another point to consider.
Absolutely. So how can a pilot, an owner, renter?
Is it a private field? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think we had a little internet freeze there, so you can continue.
Oh, no problem. I'll just kind of just jump right to the last part. The airport environment itself, what's it like? The runway length, width, facilities. If you're operating a jet aircraft, for example, insurance companies don't like runways under 5,000 feet. That's their cutoff right there for most turbine-powered airplanes.
Good bit of advice there. Yeah. So how can a pilot, either an owner or a renter, what things can they do to help lower their insurance premium?
I would say fly, gain experience, gain ratings. If you're a private pilot, get your instrument rating. If you're instrument, get your commercial. Participate in training programs as well, whether it's wings. I do wings twice a year, the basic and advanced form of it. If you fly a multi-engine airplane, maybe you do Roger Aviation or RTC. For if you're flying like a 421 or a Cessna 340. If you're flying something bigger and hotter than that, obviously you go into flight safety, SimCom or SimuFlight beyond that. But I'd say that the best thing pilots have in their favor is experience and training to lower their insurance premiums. Now, if you want to buy your insurance broker or insurance company golf and and alcohol, that certainly helps too. Kidding.
So if someone rents or borrows an aircraft, do they need their own insurance policy? So let's say even if they fall in the open pilot warranty clause, should they still have their own policy to fall back on?
I would say, so if you're renting an airplane and you don't own let's say you're renting a plane and don't own a plane, let's say, I would encourage getting renter's insurance, especially if, let's say you're renting from Illinois Aviation Academy, for example, or any flight school or FBO is likely going to have physical damage deductibles on that aircraft. And per the rental agreement, the renter would be responsible for that physical damage deductible on the airplane. So at the very least, you don't want to be left in a hole. I carry renter's insurance for that very reason, just in case you screw up, you've got it in your back pocket. Also, from a liability standpoint, again, there may be a limited form of liability insurance that the FBO or flight school may extend renter pilots. It might be 100,000, it might be 250. It's variable. But when you buy your own renter's insurance policy, it's under your name. You control it. You're afforded defense cost coverage, most especially from your insurance company, should something happen. And you have $1 there too. In most cases, you can buy $1 million of renter's insurance coverage that protects you from liability if you hurt somebody on the ground or damage someone's property. So those are very valuable and mindful things to consider.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
And so we had a question come in. So if you do have an incident, will your insurance policy, will your premiums increase?
I say it depends. It depends on what incident that you're talking about. If you run out of fuel and have an off-airport landing and experience some damage, yeah, that's kind of the big no-no out there. If you overrun the runway, kind of pilot error accidents, your insurance may go up. If you have a prop strike, yeah, your insurance may go up. I've dealt with these types of claims on a regular basis with clients from the past. Now, claims that may not impact your premium, things that I would consider acts of nature or acts of God, such as a bird strike, you had hail damage, a hangar fell on your airplane. Someone pushed their airplane into yours. Things like that you can't cite pilot error or any type of negligence from the insurer standpoint. So those would be the kind of get out of jail free cards, I call them, that a pilot would not be as culpable for from the insurance company standpoint.
For sure. We had another question came in from Bob, and he's asking about your craziest claim that you had to deal with.
Craziest claim, Dulles Airport, Washington, D.C. I had two Global Expresses parked side by side, and the hangar fell on them, not to mention about 10 to 15 other corporate jets. That caused actually one of the largest, single largest and consecutive and single largest aircraft claim, simultaneous claim ever in the history of corporate aviation.
Wow.
The whole, it took almost a year to deconstruct the hangar, get the airplanes out. And by the time you got most of the airplanes out, they had been weathered. The engines had been sitting there. Airplanes were all in almost this type of position, with the tails being leaned on by the hangar itself, the roof. So you had a lot of fluids and a lot of stresses in those hangars. Lawsuits flew around left, demanding total loss payments, et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the craziest claims that I was involved with. That went for a very long time.
Yeah, that's a big one. The getting back into liability coverage. So how much liability coverage is enough? What should be considered when determining the limits?
Yeah, getting back to what I said before, always buy as much as you can afford. And it depends certainly on the aircraft. And you may have limiting factors such as the insurance market isn't willing to offer more than you want. You might only get $1 million or $2 million if you have light single engine aircraft out there. When you get into more complex aircraft, especially turbine aircraft, the limits go up. I don't recommend people buy less than 25 million in most turbine powered airplanes. So that depends also if you are an individual owner or if you are buying your airplane on behalf of a corporation. I work with a lot of corporations, and what we get into most is if we hurt people, let's say guest passengers in the aircraft, let's say they die. What are you seeing out there? What's our legal ramifications? I'll say that the average passenger fatality is between $5 and $6 million out there. And you multiply that by the number of seats you have on your corporate jet, and that gives you a baseline to determine liability. If you have 10 seats on a common passenger jet, go ahead and multiply it by 5. And there's your $50 million right there. And that's where we see a lot of corporations begin with their company airplanes. It goes up from there. Usually, most of our clients have 100 million to 250 million. Of coverage out there, and that covers worst case scenario stuff. Get into the balance sheets of the organization as well to see what their ultimate assets and liabilities are in a worst case scenario situation. Looking at if you hit a skyscraper or crash land in a big city, what does that look like? And what's your typical complement of passengers on board that airplane as well? So it is a very large risk management question to ask, depending on if you're an individual owner or if you're a large corporation.
Absolutely, yeah, a lot of factors to weigh in that one. Now, how would one determine the proper insured value for their aircraft, and what are the effects of either over-insuring your asset or under-insuring your asset?
Sure. So two things. An appraisal will usually solve the problem where you have an accredited appraiser value your aircraft appropriately. Or most commonly, aircraft owners will work with their insurance broker, a guy like me, who has access to the aircraft blue book. And what the aircraft blue book does is provide general guidance on the aircraft, and you can build in improvements in the blue book as well to shore up the actual true value as close as you can to the aircraft. So those are two ways you can certainly do it. If you're planning to sell your airplane, I suggest getting an appraisal to get the most accurate value of what the market's seeing.
Absolutely.
What are the effects of overinsuring? The effects of overinsuring an airplane would be if you suffered considerable damage to the airplane, you may not be able to get it totaled by the insurance company. You may have a Frankenstein on your hands in a way where geez, the props are trashed, the firewalls are bent, wings bent, but I've got this 1960, Cessna, 150, valued at $230,000. That would never happen. But unless, for example, you'd never be able to total the damn thing. Yeah. So there comes to a point where it just doesn't make sense to hold on to an airplane. Once it's sustained considerable damage, that's adding the point that you're paying too much to insure the airplane by over-insuring with the insurance company. Under-insuring, just the mirror opposite. If you sustain damage to the aircraft, let's say it's not so serious, but it's under-insured, the insurance company can take the airplane away from you. They can consider it a total loss to hand you a check and say good luck, on your next journey. So that's the biggest issue with underinsuring the airplane. I will say one last thing is if owners have their aircraft financed with a bank, you will never ever, you shouldn't run into the issue of underinsuring, because the bank is always going to require you to insure it to its appropriate value, at least the minimum for what their interest is.
Great. We had another great question come in. We had a member ask, how does commercial aircraft accidents in other parts of the world affect GA insurance in the United States?
That's a really great question. How I've worked in the airline industry too, on the insurance side. The amount of premium that runs from the airlines insurance industry is significant. You could look at it like a waterfall, whereas the largest waterfall is the insurance premiums stemming from airlines. And those fill the other pools of insurance when you look at Part 135, Part 91 operators and down to general aviation, single aircraft ownership. We're all connected. It all flows down one way or another. So when the airlines are having a bad year, everybody is kind of having a bad year in a way. It's not exactly tit for tat, but you'll feel it. I'll give an example. From 2008 until 2018, we had a roughly pretty good market out there. We had a lot of competition, very soft and stable rates out there. And then the losses started piling in. Especially from the airlines with the 737 MAX that we had, the crashes in 2018, 2019, and the subsequent grounding liability losses, which were staggering. And the insurance companies had to pay on all of that. And not one insurance company can insure an airline. It takes 15, 20, 25 insurance companies sometimes to insure an airline combined between the United States and London. So that in of itself creates a pretty good ripple effect. Now, that started a hardening market with Boeing. And we had a number of other losses that you can look at, from Kobe Bryant to the Addison, Texas loss from the King Air 350 to Dale Earnhardt Jr., to several others out there. And you also had to look at the eroding premium base versus the amount of claims coming in were exceeding the premium because the rates were so low for so long that insurers got behind the proverbial power curve. So that's where we're kind of at today with rates going up out there, depending on what segment of the market you're in. That's what we're seeing.
Yep. So it's all tied together.
We're all connected one way or another.
Yep. So do you have any tips for a pilot, let's say transitioning to an advanced aircraft, maybe a piston owner trying to move into a turboprop or a turboprop into a light jet? What advice would you give to one of them in terms of premiums and insurance coverage?
Sure. I've worked with many clients like this, and on the insurance company's side as well. I can give you their opinion of that. What insurance companies like to see is a nice graduated step up to more advanced airplanes. If you owned a Cessna 182 and you want to buy an SR-22, that makes sense. You're going from one complex airplane kind of to another, but maybe a little bit faster and more technically advanced. So what do insurance companies want to see there? They want to see the training that you'll do in the aircraft, maybe some accompanied by time, maybe like 25 hours with a CSIP instructor after you purchase the airplane, just to make sure you're comfortable with it. Go through all the technical school too, with the Garmin system as well. That type of graduated approach insurance companies like to see. And then if you go from a SR-22, for example, to a CJ-1, now they want to see the same thing. They want to see what's your training platform going to look like. Who are you going to fly with for a certain amount of time? Sometimes that's about a year to get you up to speed in the airplane alongside going to flight safety initial in the airplane. The rates are going to be high naturally for the first year, 2 or 3, but they'll gradually start to teeter off the more experience you get in that particular airplane. So that's the best suggestion I can give to people, a nice stable approach upward.
Awesome. Now, how are single pilot operations looked at from an insurance perspective?
When you're looking at single pilot operations in more complex aircraft, and how I'll say that is turbine airplanes that can be flown with 2 pilots or 1. You look at the King Air 350, for example, or 200, or the CJ series airplanes. Those are considered a bit higher risk if you have an owner flying it, because that's not their sole profession and their job to do so. So they may have other distractions that may befall them. So insurance companies highly scrutinize single pilot operations, especially from an owner standpoint, largely because of workloads. Your workloads are even more dynamic now. You're in a faster airplane, you're up in the flight levels, a lot's happening a lot quicker, especially in congested airspace. Insurance companies want to know where you're going in that airplane. Even for professional pilots as well, flying, again, King Air 350s, Citation jets, are you traveling into LaGuardia a lot, or into Newark, or anywhere in the Upper East Coast? They typically want a second pilot with you to relieve the workloads, knowing how busy it can be in major metropolitan areas. Single pilot operations, you can look at almost anywhere between a 30 to 50% increase on insurance premiums.
Wow.
Because of the higher risk factor that it presents just holistically, and the claims that come in with single pilot operations. That's the big one right now. The insurance market is trying to get their arms around, because there have been so many losses surrounding single pilot that they're really sometimes even just saying we're requiring 2 pilots in this particular airplane because of its complexity.
Interesting stuff. So what are the most common reasons for aircraft claims to be denied?
Well, there's a whole multitude of them. From we can look at it from several standpoints. We can look at it from, let's say the aircraft owner didn't comply with an AD or didn't comply with maintenance, and the aircraft fell out of airworthiness certification. You go up and fly it anyway, and you have a crash. Guess what? The insurance company is going to look at your log books, the maintenance logs, etc., to see, determine if the aircraft has been properly maintained. And if it hasn't, your claim could be denied there. If your medical lapses, kind of what we discussed earlier on basic med, you no longer hold a medical and you go up and fly anyways, and your policy was very specific on you having a medical, that could deny a claim. Other things that are a bit more sinister, misrepresentation, concealment of information in the application process. Let's say you lied about your age, or you lied about the experience that you had in that particular airplane and the training, or even the airport you fly out of. Anything the underwriters or claims people can look at and say that's not right, they could deny a claim based upon improper information.
Now, speaking about pilots, can pilots be sued independently, or are they covered by the owner or the operator's insurance policy?
So yeah, that's another one of those it depends situations. If the pilot is a professional pilot for, let's say, an airline or for a corporation or for a Part 135 operator, if it's due just to negligence, pilot made a mistake, caused an accident, generally speaking, the four corners of that company's insurance policy will protect them. By virtue, that pilot was approved by the insurance company to fly the airplane. So they're compelled to defend and pay claims if coverage is indeed to be legitimate. So if it can be proved otherwise, if it was criminal or grossly negligent, then actually that falls out of insurance in a way into a whole separate set of legal issues the pilot can face individually. So it can happen. That's why I recommend, if you're an individual aircraft owner, you own a Mooney or a Piper Arrow or 172, go ahead and put your airplane into an LLC legally, just so you have some line of separation between you and your name individually and the corporation that holds on to that area of liability or social responsibility.
Absolutely. Now, what if a pilot is injured? How is a pilot compensated after an accident?
So in the same vein, if the pilot is working for an employer, an airline, a corporation, 135 operator, etc., they are covered, or they should be covered, by workers' compensation insurance that will provide compensation, obviously, for any injuries, disease, or death. And workers' compensation, I'll preface that it's basically unlimited. Each state has a statutory minimum. For Illinois, it's $1 million. You have to carry a minimum of $1 million. But if you're badly hurt on the job and you require 25 years of therapy and you need an extra limb, or you need mental therapy, let's say, that can go on for 25 years, those payments to you through workers' compensation.
Absolutely. Finally, where can owners or renters go to learn more about purchasing an insurance policy?
Online is the great virtual library out there. AOPA is a great course to learn about renters insurance. Your friendly neighborhood aviation insurance guy right here is a resource that you can tap anytime if you want to know more about owners or renters insurance and how this whole industry works.
Awesome, Chris. Well, really appreciate your time. Again, your expertise. I learned a lot. I know our viewers learned a lot. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share an hour here with us at IAA.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to do this anytime. And if certainly people have questions after the fact here, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Fantastic. And Bob says we got a case of brewskis in the fridge for you.
Deal.
All right, guys, that's it for
All
tonight.
right.
Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned next week. The 10th, we'll be speaking with a rep from 4Flight, and we'll be going over the features that you can use for planning for your next flight. Thanks again for joining us. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thank you.